Hey everybody, Pastor Dave here. Welcome back to the Crossroads Lent 40-40 Challenge, where we are reading 40 chapters of the Bible in the 40 days of Lent. If you remember yesterday, we saw this story of Samson and Delilah, and we learned that Delilah was a Philistine, and the Philistines were the ones who were trying to capture Samson. And the Philistines typically are always against Israel. They're always battling them, always trying to conquer them and things like that. In today's story, we see more of that. So let's go ahead and dive right into 1 Samuel chapter 17. Now, the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Succoth in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Succoth and Azekah. Saul and his Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he wore a coat of scaled armor of bronze, weighing about 5,000 shekels, or 125 pounds. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed about 600 shekels, or I think it was about 20 pounds, something in that range. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted at the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not from the servants of Saul?" That's interesting that he says the servants of Saul. We'll get to that in a little bit. "Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. If I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects, and you will serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the other Israelites were dismayed, and they were terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem. In Judah, Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul into war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinab, and the third Shaham. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and every evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry off to camp. Take along these 10 cheeses for the commander of the unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them." There was Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd. He loaded up and set out, as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their battle lines facing each other, and David left his things with the keeper of the supplies. He ran into the battle lines, greeting his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him with great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from paying taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to David what they had been saying, and they told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him, and he asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can I not even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as they did before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. So David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went out after it. I struck it. I rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair. I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over his tunic and tried to walk around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by all of the Philistines' gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." And David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistines' army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle belongs to the Lord, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and he struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down onto the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from his scabbard. After he killed him, he cut off his head with that sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. And then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout, and they pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn throughout Shearim on the road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put it and the Philistine's weapon in his own tent. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" Abner replied, "As surely as you live, O king, I do not know." And the king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked him. And David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." Wow. So 1 Samuel chapter 17, the epitome of the underdog story, right? All of us have heard about David and Goliath, the great underdog story. But is that really what it is? And in one sense, it is an underdog story. Because according to human measurement, by the way that we dictate who's going to win a battle, David had no chance to defeat Goliath. Goliath had been a warrior since his youth, and David had never really been in battle. Goliath had all this spear and shield and helmet and this giant sword, and all David had were a couple of stones and a sling. David, of course, Goliath was 9 feet 9 inches tall. He was huge. They say he weighed maybe 400 or 500 pounds. And David probably didn't weigh as much as Goliath's army, and he was just a young boy. So according to those measurements, according to earthly measurements, David had no chance to beat Goliath. And yet this story is really not about human measurements. That's not the way David saw the story. David, we see right up here, David understood that he was not the one who was going to defeat Goliath. David understood that it was actually God that was going to destroy Goliath. We see right up here in verse 26, he said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Right then and there is a good indicator. David had a godly perspective. He knew that God was the one that was really going to battle Goliath. And we see the same thing even in verse 36. David says, "Your servant," he's talking about himself, "has killed both lion and the bear." And so, sure, he had been prepared by God. He wasn't afraid to face difficult things, but he does not put his faith in his own ability to kill lions and bears. He says, "Yes, your servant has killed both lion and bear, but this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them." Why? Because he has defiled the armies of the living God. David had a godly perspective. And then there's this beautiful statement here in verses 46 to 48. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Goliath, you're coming after me with things of this world. You're coming after me with the things that the world would measure up and say those are important. But I'm coming against you in the power of God. And he says, "This day the Lord will hand you over to me." He knew God was the one that was going to win the victory. "And I will strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give your carcass and the Philistine carcass to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And the whole world will know," listen to this, "the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." Not only does David know that God was the one who was going to bring the victory, but he also ahead of time was giving the victory over to God. He was giving credit to God, and he knew that God was going to bring victory so that God would be known throughout the world. And all those gathered here will know that not sword, not spear, that God saves. For the battle belongs to the Lord, and he will give all of you into our hands. Another great part of the story there, God does not save by sword and spear. He saves by his word. He saves by his will. How many of you and me, how many times do we get up in the morning and face this world according to the world, according to worldly standards? You know, Paul in Ephesians, he says, "We do not fight against flesh and blood." Our fight is not against these worldly things, but it's against principalities. Paul says we are in a spiritual battle. And David knew that, and he was victorious because he fought in the perspective of God. How many times do you and I forget that, and we fight against the things that we're fighting against with a worldly perspective? And, right now you might be in a battle against something that might seem like a Goliath, and you might feel unprepared and small like a David. But I'm here to tell you that the battle belongs to the Lord. And as you put your faith in Jesus Christ, you will be victorious. Amen.